Welcome to this video. It includes 3 days of learning new words, featuring 30 useful words to boost your English. To understand the words better, listen to the stories carefully twice. Try to grasp the meaning of each word and then create your own sentences. If you like, you can share your sentences in the comments below. Remember, don't rush your learning. Consistency is one of the most important keys to success. With every small step, you're getting closer to the peak of your English journey. Imagine the progress you'll make after 100 days of learning new words like these. So, let's take these small steps together and see how far we can go. Start now and enjoy the journey. Watch the video and discover new words to add to your vocabulary today. Let's get started.
The anniversary surprise that changed everything. It was my parents' 25th wedding anniversary, and I wanted to make it unforgettable. As their only child, I felt it was my duty to honor their love. I remember growing up hearing them talk about their first anniversary. They couldn't afford much then, just a small cake and a card. This time, I wanted to give them something big, a surprise party. I booked a beautiful hall, invited all their friends, and even found a baker to recreate their wedding cake. The hardest part was keeping it a secret. Every time I spoke to my mom, she asked, "What are you planning for our anniversary?" I just smiled and said, "You'll see." The day finally arrived. My parents thought we were taking them out for a quiet dinner. When they walked into the hall and saw the decorations, the candles, and all their friends shouting, "Happy anniversary!" my mom burst into tears. My dad stood frozen for a moment, then smiled the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Everyone shared stories about my parents' anniversaries over the years. "Remember your 10th anniversary?" Aunt Lisa laughed. "You tried to bake a cake and it collapsed." My dad chuckled. "At least it tasted good." Then came my surprise. I handed them a photo album titled Our Anniversaries Through the Years. Inside were pictures from every anniversary, even the ones when they had nothing but each other. My mom held the album close to her heart. "This is the best gift ever," she said, her voice trembling. That night, as I cleaned up the hall, I thought about how special anniversaries are, not just the big ones, but the small ones too. They're reminders of love, commitment, and the memories we build together.
The festivity that brought us together. It was the day of the town's annual festivity, a celebration everyone waited for all year. As I walked through the square, the air was alive with music, laughter, and the smell of delicious food. Children ran around with balloons, and families gathered to watch the performances. For me, this festivity wasn't just an event, it was a chance to reconnect. My younger sister, Emma, had been distant ever since she moved to another city for work. But she promised to come back for this special day. The festivity had always been our thing, our tradition. Hours passed, and there was no sign of her. The festivity felt incomplete without her. I tried to enjoy the colorful stalls and lively dances, but my mind kept wandering. Would she break her promise? Just as the final fireworks began, I saw her. Emma stood at the edge of the crowd, holding a small gift bag. I ran toward her, and she hugged me tightly. "I wouldn't miss our festivity for anything," she said with a smile. We spent the rest of the evening together, laughing at the clowns, dancing to the music, and eating way too much cotton candy. As the festivity came to an end, Emma handed me the bag. Inside was a photo of us at the same festivity years ago, holding hands as kids. "This festivity is special," she said, her voice soft. "No matter where life takes us, it brings us back together." As I walked home that night, I realized the festivity wasn't just about fun, it was about family, memories, and the connections that matter most.
The decoration that saved the day. I still remember that winter evening. It was my best friend Lily's birthday, and I had promised to decorate the venue. Decorations had always been my favorite part of any celebration. I loved choosing colors, arranging flowers, and making everything look magical. But this time something went wrong. When I arrived at the hall, all the decorations I had ordered were missing. The delivery man had taken them to the wrong address. I panicked. Party was in 2 hours, and the hall was completely empty. I called Lily's brother Jack for help. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll make decorations ourselves." He rushed over with craft supplies, and we got to work. We cut colorful paper into flowers, hung fairy lights, and even made a giant decoration out of balloons. As we worked, I realized something. Decorations aren't just about how they look, they're about the effort and love you put into them. By the time guests arrived, the hall looked stunning. The handmade decorations were simple but beautiful, and everyone admired them. When Lily walked in, her eyes lit up. "These decorations are amazing," she said, hugging me. I smiled, knowing we had turned a disaster into a success. Later that night, as I watched Lily laugh with her friends under the sparkling decorations, I felt proud. It wasn't the most perfect setup, but it was meaningful. Decorations can transform a space, but the memories they create are what make them truly special.
The invitation I almost ignored. I wasn't planning to go. The invitation sat on my desk for weeks, untouched. It was from my high school friend, Ethan, who was getting married. We hadn't talked much in years, and honestly, I felt like an outsider in his new life. The invitation was beautiful, golden edges, elegant handwriting, but I kept telling myself, why would he care if I showed up? The night before the wedding, I stared at the invitation one last time. A small voice inside me whispered, "Go." The next morning, I put on my best suit and drove to the venue. As I walked in, I felt awkward. Everyone seemed to know each other, and I wondered if this was a mistake. But then Ethan spotted me. His face lit up as he walked over. "You came," he said, shaking my hand. "Your invitation wasn't just a formality. I really wanted you here." Hearing that melted my doubts. Throughout the day, I met old friends, laughed at shared memories, and felt a connection I hadn't realized I missed. The invitation had brought me back to a part of my life I thought I'd outgrown. At the end of the evening, Ethan handed me a small envelope. Inside was another invitation, this time to a weekend reunion with our group of friends. "Let's not lose touch again," he said with a smile. Driving home, I thought about how a simple invitation could change so much. It wasn't just a card. It was a bridge, a chance to reconnect, to say yes to life.
A toast to a new beginning. When my brother David asked me to give a toast at his wedding, I froze. I had never spoken in front of so many people before. The thought of standing up and raising a glass in front of all those eyes made my hands sweat. For days I tried to write the perfect toast. "A toast is simple," David said when I told him about my struggle. "Just speak from the heart." But every time I tried to put my feelings into words, they felt too small for the moment. On the wedding day, I still didn't have my toast ready. As the celebration went on, I nervously watched other people give their toasts. They spoke about love, happiness, and funny memories. I felt like I would never match their confidence. When my turn came, I hesitated. The room grew quiet as I stood with my glass in hand. I looked at David and his new wife, Anna. They were smiling, their love shining brighter than any words I could say. Taking a deep breath, I began. "To me, a toast is more than words. It's a moment to share what's in your heart." I talked about David's kindness, Anna's warmth, and the way they made each other better. I thanked them for showing us what true love looks like. As I finished, the room erupted in cheers. David hugged me tightly and whispered, "That was the best toast ever." Driving home that night, I realized a toast isn't about being perfect. It's about sincerity and celebrating the people we love. The costume that changed everything. When I walked into the party, all eyes turned to me. It wasn't my face they noticed, it was my costume. The shimmering golden dress, the long cape, and the sparkling crown made me look like a queen from a fairy tale. Costume wasn't mine. It belonged to my cousin Mia, who was supposed to wear it to the costume party. But at the last minute, she got sick and insisted I go instead. "Wear the costume," she said. "It will make you feel confident." First, I hesitated. Costume felt like a mask, something to hide behind. But as I stood there in the party, surrounded by pirates, witches, and superheroes, I realized something. Costume wasn't hiding me, it was helping me become someone I had always wanted to be, brave, bold, and unafraid. People came up to me, asking about my costume. "You look amazing," one of them said. Another asked, "Did you design the costume yourself?" I laughed and told them it was Mia's idea. As the night went on, I danced, laughed, and even spoke on stage when the host announced the costume contest. When they called my name as the winner, I couldn't believe it. Costume had done more than make me look like a queen. It had given me the confidence to act like one. Driving home, I thought about the power of costumes. They aren't just clothes, they're a chance to transform, to step into a role you never thought you could play. And sometimes that's all you need to discover the courage inside yourself.
Fireworks in the sky and in my heart. The New Year's Eve celebration in my small town was famous for its fireworks. Every year, I would stand at the edge of the lake, waiting for the first explosion of color. But this year was different. This year, Emma was standing beside me. Emma had never seen fireworks before. She grew up in a city where fireworks were banned. "Are they really that special?" she asked, her voice soft. I smiled. "You'll see," I replied. As the clock struck midnight, the first firework shot into the sky. It exploded in a shower of red and gold, lighting up the lake and Emma's face. "Wow," she whispered, her eyes wide. More fireworks followed, green, blue, and purple. Each explosion seemed louder and brighter than the last. Emma laughed as a firework shaped like a heart burst in the sky. "It's like magic," she said. I couldn't take my eyes off her. The fireworks reflected in her eyes, making them sparkle. For a moment I forgot about the cold night air and the crowd around us. All I could see was her smile. As the finale began, the sky filled with hundreds of fireworks. The colors danced and merged, painting the night with light. Emma turned to me and said, "Now I understand why you love fireworks so much." I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the fireworks anymore. I was thinking about how, in that moment, my heart felt just like the sky, bright, full, and alive.
The celebration that changed everything. In our small village, the annual spring celebration was the most important event of the year. It wasn't just a party. It was a moment when everyone came together, leaving behind their worries. This year, the celebration felt different for me. My family had been chosen to organize the celebration, a great honor but also a lot of pressure. I was responsible for the decorations and making sure the celebration went perfectly. My mother reminded me daily, "This celebration is a symbol of our unity, Maya. Don't forget that." On the morning of the celebration, the village square buzzed with excitement. Brightly colored banners hung between the trees, and tables were covered with flowers and delicious food. I looked at everything and thought, this is going to be the best celebration ever. But then the rain came. Heavy and sudden, it washed away the flowers and soaked the decorations. People ran for cover and my heart sank. The celebration we had worked so hard for seemed ruined. Then something amazing happened. One by one, people came back to the square, bringing umbrellas, blankets, and even more flowers. They started singing, laughing, and dancing in the rain. The celebration was alive again, not because of the decorations, but because of the people. As I stood there, drenched but smiling, I realized something important. A celebration isn't about perfection. It's about joy, togetherness, and sharing moments with the people who matter most. That night, as the rain finally stopped, the village square sparkled under the moonlight. The celebration had become even more beautiful because of the love and unity it showed.
Breaking the tradition to create a new one. In our family, every winter began with the same tradition. My grandfather would sit by the fireplace and tell us stories about our ancestors. He believed traditions were the threads that held our family together. "Without tradition, we lose who we are," he would say. This year, however, our tradition was at risk. My grandfather had fallen ill, and the thought of a winter without his stories felt unbearable. I decided to carry on the tradition myself. I gathered my siblings around the fire and tried to remember his word. As I told the stories, I realized I didn't know all the details. I hesitated, and my younger sister asked, "Why don't we create a new tradition?" Her words surprised me. Could a new tradition replace the old one? That evening, we started something different. We wrote down the stories we could remember and added our own. We laughed as we made up silly endings to the tales. My grandfather, though weak, smiled as he listened from his bed. It felt strange at first, changing something so old. But I understood then that a tradition isn't just about repeating the past. It's about keeping the spirit alive. By creating new traditions, we were honoring the old ones while making something that fit us today. As the fire crackled and our voices filled the room, I knew our family tradition was safe, not because it was the same, but because it was alive.
A reunion that changed everything. It had been 10 years since I left my hometown. I never thought about a reunion with my old classmates until an invitation arrived in my mailbox. The idea of a reunion filled me with excitement and fear. What if no one remembered me? When I entered the hall on the night of the reunion, the sound of laughter and chatter surrounded me. Old friends hugged and shared stories, their faces lighting up as they recognized one another. I hesitated, unsure of where I fit into this lively reunion. Then a familiar voice called my name. It was Emma, my best friend from school. "I can't believe you're here. This reunion wouldn't be the same without you," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. As the night went on, the reunion became more than just catching up. It was a chance to reconnect with people who had shaped my past. We shared memories of school plays, soccer games, and late-night study sessions. Every story brought us closer, reminding me why reunions are so special. By the end of the evening, I no longer felt like a stranger. The reunion had given me something I didn't know I needed, a chance to rediscover the joy of old connections and to realize how much those bonds still mattered. As I walked home, I felt a warmth in my heart. This reunion wasn't just about the past. It was about finding pieces of myself I thought I had lost.
A day full of errands. I woke up early on Saturday, knowing I had a long list of errands to do. My mom had asked me to help her with some tasks around the house, and I couldn't say no. The first errand was to the grocery store. I grabbed a shopping list and drove to the market. In the store, I realized I had forgotten my shopping bags, so I had to buy new ones. It was a small problem, but it added more time to my errands. After that, I went to the post office to send a package. The line was long and I had to wait. I was getting tired. But the day was not over. My mom needed me to pick up her dry cleaning, and then I had to stop by the bank. Each errand felt like a small mountain I had to climb. I started to feel frustrated, but I reminded myself that I was helping my mom. Finally, after a long day, I finished all my errands. I drove back home, feeling exhausted but satisfied. My mom thanked me, and I smiled. Even though errands can be tiring, I realized that doing them for someone I care about made everything worth it. What I lost and found. Last week, I had to move to a new city for a job. I was excited but nervous. As I packed, I looked at my belongings. My clothes, books, and old photos, they meant so much to me. But I couldn't take everything. I had to choose carefully. I packed my belongings into several boxes and bags. Some things, like my old guitar and my favorite books, were easy to pack. Other things, like my childhood toys, were harder to decide. I didn't want to leave them behind, but I knew I couldn't carry everything with me. The moving day came, and I carefully placed my belongings into the moving truck. After the long drive, I finally reached my new apartment. I was happy to be there, but something felt strange. I started unpacking, but I noticed something was missing. I looked around my apartment. The most important thing, the box with my childhood toys, was gone. I felt a wave of panic. I searched through the truck, but it was too late. My belongings were scattered, and the box was nowhere to be found. I called the moving company, but they said it was too late. My childhood toys were lost. I felt sad, but then I remembered all the other things I had, my clothes, my books, my photos. Even though I lost some of my belongings, I still had many things that were important to me. In the end, I realized that belongings are not just things. They are memories and experiences. I didn't need everything to feel at home in my new city. My belongings were more than just items. They were part of who I am. A warm welcome in a cold place. Last month, I traveled to a small town far from home for work. The weather was cold, and I felt lonely in the unfamiliar place. When I arrived at the hotel, I was tired and wanted nothing more than a warm bed. But what happened next was something I didn't expect. The hotel owner, an older woman named Mrs. Clark, greeted me with a big smile. "Welcome. It's so nice to have you here," she said, shaking my hand. I was surprised. She made me feel special from the very first moment. As I checked in, Mrs. Clark offered me tea and told me about the town. "I always make sure my guests feel at home," she explained. "That's the real hospitality. It's not just about the bed or food. It's about making someone feel welcome." Over the next few days, I experienced her hospitality in every way. She gave me tips on the best places to visit, made me my favorite breakfast, and even shared stories about the town's history. Every time I returned to the hotel after work, Mrs. Clark would greet me with a warm smile and ask about my day. I felt cared for, like I was part of her family. One evening, there was a small event at the hotel, and Mrs. Clark invited me to join. I wasn't sure at first, but when I walked into the room, I saw so many people laughing and talking. They welcomed me as if I had been there for years. That's when I truly understood what hospitality meant. It wasn't just about food or comfort, it was about kindness, warmth, and making others feel at ease. Mrs. Clark's hospitality made me realize that feeling welcome is the most important thing when you are away from home. The unexpected convenience of simplicity. Last month, I moved to a new city for work. The city was large, fast, and full of modern buildings. I was excited, but I quickly realized how busy everything was. I had to find a place to live, learn the routes to work, and adjust to a new way of life. I felt overwhelmed. One day, while I was walking around looking for a place to buy lunch, I noticed a small shop on the corner of the street. It looked simple and old-fashioned, unlike the big modern stores I had seen everywhere. Curious, I went inside. The shop was cozy. The owner, an older man named Mr. Green, smiled when he saw me. "Welcome. Feel free to sit down," he said. I looked at the menu, and it was full of simple, delicious dishes. There was no complicated technology, no long lines, just a simple meal made with care. I ordered a sandwich, and while I waited, I watched Mr. Green serve other customers. Each one looked happy, and everyone seemed to be enjoying the atmosphere of the shop. As I sat down to eat, I realized something. The convenience of the small shop was incredible. There were no long waits, no crowded spaces, just good food and good service. It was simple, but everything I needed was right there. It didn't have the fancy features of the big stores, but I didn't need that. What I needed was a place that was easy, quick, and comfortable, and this shop offered all of that. Over time, I started going there every day. I learned that sometimes the best convenience isn't in the biggest or most advanced places. Sometimes it's in the simplest things that make life easier.
A day of true leisure. Last Saturday, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time, nothing. I woke up early, but instead of rushing to work or cleaning my house, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. It felt strange at first, like I was wasting time. But soon I realized that I wasn't wasting time at all, I was enjoying leisure. Leisure, I thought, is not just about sitting around. It's about taking a break from the busy world. It's about doing things that make you feel relaxed and happy without worrying about work or responsibilities. That day, I went for a walk in the park, taking my time to enjoy the flowers, the fresh air, and the sound of birds. It was a simple pleasure, but it felt amazing. In the afternoon, I sat on my couch with a book. No deadlines, no phone calls, just me and my book. As I read, I thought about how much I often forget to enjoy these moments of leisure. We get so caught up in work and tasks that we forget how important it is to take time for ourselves. Leisure is the space we need to recharge and feel good. In the evening, I called my friend and asked her to join me for a quiet dinner. We laughed, talked about our week, and enjoyed the calmness of the evening. I realized that these moments of leisure were making me feel peaceful and content. They were the little breaks that give life balance and joy. By the end of the day, I felt rested, happy, and ready for the week ahead. I promised myself I would make more time for leisure in the future.
The magic of spontaneity. One weekend, my friends and I were sitting in a cafe, talking about what to do. We had planned nothing special, and the day was slowly passing by. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah said, "Why don't we just go to the beach right now?" It was a spontaneous idea, and at first, I wasn't sure. But something about her excitement made me say, "Why not?" We left the cafe without any plans, no bags, no preparation, just us and the idea of the beach. As we walked towards the train station, I realized how refreshing this was. The spontaneity of it all made everything feel new and exciting. No schedules, no rules, just the moment. When we reached the beach, the sun was starting to set, and the sky turned beautiful shades of pink and orange. We didn't have any towels or food, but it didn't matter. We sat on the sand enjoying the cool breeze and each other's company. Spontaneity had brought us here, and it was perfect. No worries, no pressure, just a simple and unexpected adventure. As the evening went on, I noticed how much joy we had found in this simple, unplanned moment. It was easy to enjoy the beach without expectations. I had spent so many days following strict plans, but this spontaneity had made the day unforgettable. By the end of the night, we all agreed that the best moments in life often happen when we let go of control and just follow our instincts. Spontaneity had turned a regular Saturday into an amazing memory. The struggle of juggling everything. Last week, I found myself in a situation I often face: multitasking. It started like any other busy day. I was sitting at my desk, trying to finish my report for work, but at the same time I was checking emails, answering phone calls, and sending messages to my friends. My mind was jumping from one thing to another. It felt overwhelming. As I worked, I realized that multitasking was taking over my life. At one point, I was writing an important email, but I also had a meeting coming up, so I tried to prepare for it while continuing to type. Suddenly, I missed a key part of the conversation in the meeting because I was still answering messages on my phone. My focus was divided, and I didn't feel like I was doing anything well. After that, I decided to take a break. I went to grab a coffee and thought about how often I try to do multiple things at once. I realized that multitasking might seem like a good idea, but it can actually make things harder. I wasn't finishing tasks efficiently or paying attention to important details. The more I tried to do, the less I was achieving. When I returned to my desk, I decided to focus on one task at a time. First, I finished my report. Then, I responded to emails. By the end of the day, I was surprised at how much more I had accomplished. It was a valuable lesson. Multitasking may feel productive, but sometimes, focusing on one thing at a time leads to better results. The cost of being late. I used to think being a little late wasn't a big deal. It's just a few minutes, I would say to myself. But then something happened that changed my view on punctuality forever. It all started when I got a job interview for a company I had always wanted to work for. I was excited and nervous. On the day of the interview, I woke up late. My alarm didn't ring, and I rushed to get ready. I thought, it's okay, I can still make it if I hurry. I skipped breakfast and drove as fast as I could. But when I arrived, I was 10 minutes late. As I walked into the office, the receptionist gave me a quick look. The interview had already started, and the hiring manager didn't seem happy to see me. I apologized, but the manager said, "Punctuality is important here. We respect people who are on time." That day, I learned a hard lesson. I had lost the opportunity because I wasn't punctual. From that moment on, I made punctuality a priority in my life. I started setting my alarm earlier, planning my day better, and making sure I was always on time. Soon, I noticed the difference. At work, I was more respected because I was punctual. People trusted me to meet deadlines, attend meetings, and finish tasks on time. Being punctual showed that I was responsible and dependable. It wasn't just about showing up. It was about showing respect for other people's time. The power of mediation. I never thought I would need mediation. My life was simple, and I believed that conflicts could always be solved by talking. But everything changed when my best friend, Ollie, and I had a serious disagreement. It all started with a small misunderstanding. We were both invited to a wedding, and Ollie thought I had promised to go with him. I had no idea what he was talking about. Our conversation turned into an argument. We shouted at each other and didn't speak for days. I was upset because I felt misunderstood, and Ollie was angry because he felt I had let him down. One afternoon, my sister suggested we try mediation. "Why not talk it out with someone who can help you both?" she said. I wasn't sure, but I agreed because I didn't want to lose my friendship with Ollie. We met with a mediator, a neutral person who listened to both of us. The mediator didn't take sides but asked us to explain our feelings and thoughts. Slowly, I started to understand Ollie's point of view. He didn't mean to accuse me, he just felt disappointed. I also realized that I hadn't been clear about my plans, which caused the misunderstanding. The mediator guided us through the conversation and helped us find a solution. By the end of the session, we apologized and promised to communicate better in the future. Mediation taught me that sometimes we need someone to help us see the truth without taking side. The mediator didn't solve the problem for us, but they gave us the space and tools to solve it together. Since then, I've used mediation in other situations, and I've learned how powerful it can be in resolving conflict. The key to a great connection. When I first started my new job, I felt nervous. My manager, Mr. Smith, was very professional, but I wasn't sure how to talk to him. I wanted to do well, but I didn't know how to connect with him. I had heard that building a good rapport with someone at work could make everything easier, but I didn't know where to start. One morning, we had a meeting, and I noticed that Mr. Smith was in a good mood. He smiled and asked how I was doing. Instead of being shy, I decided to try something new. I smiled back and said, "I'm doing well, thank you. How about you?" He seemed pleased by my response, and we began talking about our weekend plans. We had a lot in common. He liked to travel, just like I did. After that conversation, I realized something important. Building rapport isn't just about talking, it's about connecting with the other person in a meaningful way. I learned that when you find common ground and show genuine interest, it makes communication much easier. Over the next few weeks, I continued to chat with Mr. Smith whenever I had the chance. I asked him about his trips, and he asked me about mine. Slowly, we developed a strong rapport. One day, Mr. Smith called me into his office. He smiled and said, "I'm glad we've built a good rapport. I think you'll be great at the next project." I felt proud. It wasn't just about doing my job well, it was also about the connection we had formed. Through this experience, I learned that rapport is the foundation of good relationships at work. It makes collaboration easier and helps people feel comfortable. Now I know that taking the time to build rapport is worth it.
The day humor saved the meeting. It was my first big presentation at work. The entire team, including the CEO, was in the room. My hands were shaking and my voice felt stuck. As I clicked to the second slide, the projector suddenly shut off. A long silence filled the room. I could feel everyone staring at me. In that moment, I remembered something my grandmother always said. Humor can turn any bad situation around. So instead of panicking, I smiled and said, "Looks like even the projector thinks my presentation is too boring." The room erupted into laughter. That simple moment of humor broke the tension. The IT technician came in to fix the projector. While we waited, I used humor again to keep the room engaged. I joked about how my cat had once walked across my laptop and edited my slides. People were laughing, nodding, and sharing their own funny stories. Suddenly, I wasn't scared anymore. When the projector was back on, I finished my presentation. Everyone clapped at the end, and the CEO came up to me. "Great job," he said, smiling. "Your humor really brought everyone together." That day, I learned the power of humor. It's not just about making people laugh. It's about creating a connection, easing tension, and showing confidence. Humor turned a stressful moment into a memorable one. Now, I always keep a bit of humor in my back pocket, ready to use when things get tough.
The vivid memory that changed everything. I had a vivid dream last night. It felt so real, as if I could touch every detail. I was standing in a meadow, the grass glowing a vivid green under the golden sunlight. A little girl with vivid blue eyes was holding a red balloon, its color so bright it almost hurt to look at. When I woke up, the vivid images stayed with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this dream had a meaning. At breakfast, I told my sister about it. She smiled and said, "Dreams with such vivid details are rare. Maybe your mind is trying to tell you something." That day at work, I couldn't focus. The vivid colors of the dream played in my head like a movie. I decided to visit the park after work. It wasn't the same meadow from my dream, but the vivid green of the grass reminded me of it. I sat on a bench, thinking about life and the choices I had made. Then I saw her, a little girl with vivid blue eyes holding a red balloon, just like in my dream. My heart skipped a beat. This can't be real, I thought. I walked closer and realized she was lost. Her vivid tears sparkled in the sunlight as she cried. I helped her find her mother, who thanked me with a vivid smile of relief. That night, I thought about how vivid moments like these shape our lives. They remind us to pay attention, to connect, and to act. Life isn't just about passing time. It's about living vividly, noticing the bright colors and emotions all around us.
A box of cherished memories. When I was a little girl, my grandmother gave me a small wooden box. She told me it was from my most cherished treasures. "Only keep what truly matters," she said with her warm smile. I didn't fully understand her words back then, but I cherished the box itself because it came from her. Over the years, the box filled with cherished items. A shell from the beach, a letter from my best friend, and a tiny photo of my grandmother holding me as a baby. Each item had a story, a memory I cherished deeply. One rainy afternoon, as I cleaned my attic, I found the box buried under old books. I hadn't opened it in years. When I did, the scent of lavender, my grandmother's favorite, filled the air. My hands trembled as I picked up the photo of her. Her kind eyes and soft smile reminded me of the countless cherished moments we shared. Tears welled up as I realized how much time had passed. The box wasn't just a collection of things. It was a reminder of the people and memories I cherished most. I understood now what my grandmother meant. To cherish something is to hold it close to your heart, to treasure it more than words can express. I took the box downstairs and placed it on my shelf. It was no longer forgotten in the attic, but cherished once again, just as my grandmother would have wanted.
The longest night, an ordeal to remember. It was supposed to be a quick trip. a short hike through the forest to reach the lake before sunset. But the ordeal began when I realized I had lost the trail. The once clear path was gone, and the towering trees seemed to close in around me. At first, I thought it was a small mistake. I laughed it off, thinking, "This is no ordeal. I'll find my way soon." But as the sky turned darker, fear began to creep in. My phone had no signal, and the flashlight in my bag barely lit the way. Every rustle in the bushes felt like a threat, and each step deeper into the forest made my ordeal worse. Hours passed. The night grew colder, and I began to regret my decision to hike alone. I found a fallen tree to sit on and tried to calm myself. "This is just an ordeal," I whispered, "and all ordeals end." I closed my eyes and focused on the sound of the wind, trying to find comfort in its rhythm. Suddenly, a distant light appeared. I scrambled to my feet, shouting for help. The light grew closer, and soon a park ranger emerged. He smiled kindly and said, "Looks like you've had quite an ordeal. Let's get you back." The relief I felt was overwhelming. The ordeal was over, but I knew I had learned something important. An ordeal isn't just a challenge, it's a test of patience, courage, and hope. That night, I promised myself to be more prepared and to never underestimate the power of nature or myself.
The turning point that changed my life. For years, my life felt like a routine I couldn't escape. I woke up, went to my dull office job, and came home too tired to dream of anything better. But one day, I hit my turning point. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I had just finished filing another stack of papers. My boss called me into his office. I thought it was about another task, but instead he said, "We're letting you go. The company is downsizing." First, I felt lost. Losing my job felt like a failure, but I soon realized it was a turning point. For the first time in years, I had no plan, no schedule. It was terrifying, but it was also an opportunity. That night, I sat with my journal, writing down the dreams I had pushed aside for so long. "This is my turning point," I told myself, "and I will not waste it." The next day, I enrolled in a baking course, something I had always loved but never pursued. First, I doubted myself. Could I really start over? But each day in the kitchen felt like progress. Each loaf of bread and cake I made brought me closer to a dream I didn't know I had. Months later, I opened my small bakery. On the opening day, as I watched customers enjoy my creations, I thought about that day in my boss's office. What felt like a disaster was actually the turning point I needed. Now I welcome turning points even when they come as challenges. They remind me that life doesn't move in straight lines, it turns and shifts, leading us to new paths.
The pivotal choice that shaped my future. I always believed that life was a straight road, but I've learned it's full of pivotal moments, moments that change everything. For me, it all began on the last day of high school. That day I received 2 letters. One was an acceptance letter to a local college. The other was from my uncle in another city, inviting me to work in his small repair shop. Choosing between them felt impossible. College seemed like the right thing to do, but the idea of working and learning a trade also intrigued me. This was a pivotal decision, one that would shape my future. I talked to my parents, my friends, even my neighbor, but no one could tell me what to do. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the letters. Which one is pivotal? I thought. Which one will lead me to the life I want? The next morning, I made my choice. I packed my bags and moved to my uncle's city. The first week was tough, I didn't know anyone, and the work was harder than I expected. But as days turned into weeks, I started enjoying the challenges. My uncle taught me not just about fixing machines, but also about running a business. He said, "Every decision you make is pivotal. Even small choices can lead to big changes." 3 years later, I own my own repair shop. Looking back, I realize how pivotal that one decision was. It wasn't easy, but it taught me to trust my instincts and embrace change. Now I see pivotal moments everywhere. Life isn't about avoiding them, it's about facing them, choosing boldly, and learning from whatever comes next.
The fleeting moments that changed everything. I never imagined how fleeting life could be until that summer evening. The golden sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. It was the kind of beauty that felt fleeting, here one moment and gone the next. I was walking through the park, lost in thought, when I saw a boy chasing a butterfly. His laughter filled the air, but it was fleeting, replaced by silence as the butterfly flew out of reach. I couldn't help but smile, thinking about how fleeting joy often is. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister. "Come home. Grandpa is not well." My heart sank. Memories of my childhood flooded back. Grandpa teaching me how to ride a bike, his stories about his adventures, and his advice to cherish fleeting moments because time waits for no one. I rushed to the hospital, my mind racing. When I arrived, Grandpa smiled weakly at me. "Ah, there you are," he said, his voice soft but warm. "Life is full of fleeting moments, my dear. Don't miss them." We sat together, holding hands as he shared his favorite memories. Each story reminded me how fleeting happiness, sadness, and even time can be. He told me to embrace life, even if it feels fleeting, because those moments shape who we are. That night, I stayed by his side until he fell asleep. The next morning, he was gone. His last words stayed with me. "Life is fleeting, but love is eternal." Now I look at life differently. I cherish fleeting joys, fleeting sunsets, and even fleeting challenges. They all pass, but they leave behind lessons that last forever.
When serendipity led me to a stranger's kindness. It was supposed to be an ordinary day. I had missed my usual bus to work and, as a result, found myself walking through a part of the city I didn't know. Frustrated and running late, I couldn't imagine how serendipity might play a role in my morning. As I turned a corner, I stumbled upon a small bookshop. It looked old, with stacks of books spilling out onto the sidewalk. Serendipity had placed it there, I thought, as if to distract me from my bad mood. I stepped inside, drawn by the smell of old pages. While browsing, I overheard a young woman talking to the shop owner. She was looking for a rare book to give her father. It just so happened that I had read that very book years ago and knew where she might find it. Smiling, I stepped forward and shared the information. Her eyes lit up with gratitude, and she thanked me profusely. That moment felt like pure serendipity. If I hadn't missed my bus, I wouldn't have been there to help her. She introduced herself as Claire, and we chatted briefly about books and life. It turned out that Claire worked at a company I had dreamed of joining. She offered to help me connect with someone there, calling it serendipity in action. True to her word, Claire set up a meeting for me. That meeting became the beginning of a new chapter in my career. Looking back, I realized how serendipity works in unexpected ways. Missing the bus felt like an inconvenience, but it led to something far greater than I could have imagined.
In hindsight, it was all clear. When I was 18, I thought I knew everything. I made decisions quickly, never stopping to think about the consequences. Now, in hindsight, I realize how wrong I was. It was my first year at university. A friend, Lily, suggested we join a hiking trip to a mountain nearby. "It'll be fun," she said. I didn't hesitate, even though I had no proper hiking gear. In hindsight, I should have prepared. Trail was harder than I expected. By the time we reached the middle of the mountain, my legs were shaking. I had no water left, and my shoes were falling apart. Lily, noticing my struggle, asked if we should go back. But I insisted on continuing. In hindsight, I should have listened to her. Halfway up, it started raining. The rocks became slippery, and I slipped, twisting my ankle. Panic set in as the group moved ahead, leaving Lily and me behind. She stayed calm, helping me find shelter under a tree. In hindsight, her kindness saved me. That night, as we waited for help, I thought about all my choices. I had rushed into this trip without thinking. I had ignored the warning signs and pushed myself too far. In hindsight, I realized that I needed to think things through more carefully. The next morning, rescue came. I returned home, my ankle bandaged but my mind clearer. Now, every time I make a decision, I remind myself of that rainy night on the mountain. Hindsight has taught me the value of preparation and listening to advice.
An unfinished endeavor under the stars. As a boy, I often dreamed of building a telescope. It wasn't just an idea, it was an endeavor that filled my thoughts every single day. I wanted to see the stars up close, to uncover their secrets, even though I didn't have the tools or knowledge to begin. One summer, I gathered scraps, old lenses, metal pipes, and some wood. I worked tirelessly, treating my endeavor as though it was the most important mission of my life. Days turned into weeks, and soon, the pile of junk began to look like a telescope. But my endeavor wasn't without challenges. The lenses didn't align properly, and I didn't know how to fix them. Frustration crept in, but I didn't give up. I read every book I could find and asked my science teacher for advice. "An endeavor worth pursuing will test your patience," he said. His words stayed with me. One night, as I adjusted the lenses under the dim light of my garage, something incredible happened. I aimed the telescope at the sky and saw a blurry but magnificent view of the moon. My heart raced. My endeavor wasn't perfect, but it worked. From that moment, I understood something. Every endeavor, no matter how small, has the potential to lead to something extraordinary. I didn't stop there. Years later, I pursued astronomy as my career. That telescope, born from a childhood endeavor, became my first step toward a life of discovery.